landing rocket arm switch is on. Here comes the throttle. Circuit breakers in.
We have separation.
Inboard and outboards are on. Coming forward with the side stick.
Looks good.
Roger.
I've got a blowout. Vapor 3.
Get your pitch to 0.
Pitches out. I can't hold altitude.
Direction alpha hold is off. Trap selectors emergency.
Flight com. I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
Pop goes the culture, cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture, cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture, cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture, cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop. Turning on like a hardcore yammer. Music's magical like the curse put on Thor's hammer. Lay low with the halo, half angel, half demon like Constantine. Avenging horrors, old-fashioned references with modern themes. Prometheus, the center fire was sent to us. Shine so bright, it's so desperately dark. The light bearers condemning us. We break free as a cunning convict. You try to limit us, Steve. I see you. Leave me alone, cause Zimmer Robert stress is see-through. Angry cause most of my idols are locked up because of me too. Captivating cause the core continues and my words are great. I will not survive a copyright claim by third base. Pop goes the culture. Pop goes the culture cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop goes the culture cause the culture goes pop, 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 pop.
All right, and there we go. And we just kicked off now our first episode with our official theme song, which we unveiled on our previous episode. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome. Joining our show is the lovely and talented
Scott Wilson.
And I'm Stevie Stroh. And we're here, and we're going to talk about some stuff today. There's a movie you saw that I didn't, and I'm quite happy that I didn't see it. I'll let you talk about that. We're talking about, of course, which movie would that be, Scott?
Super Mario Brothers.
Okay, we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about a couple of season 3s. We have 2 season 3s that just wrapped this week. Season 3 of The Mandolorian and season 3 of Picard. So kick it off, Scott. I didn't see the movie, but don't worry about spoilers. Tell me everything that I need to know and even things I don't need to know about the new Super Mario Brothers movie that just hit the theaters recently.
If you played the original Super Mario Brothers or all the Super Mario Brothers games, you pretty much already know whatever you need to know going in. Because if you haven't played those games, there's nothing in that movie for you. And what I mean by that is the movie is made in such a way that you cannot expect anything other than what the title describes. It's a Super Mario Brothers movie. And that's both good and bad. It's good in the sense that it's a very beautiful film to look at. They do a great job of visually representing what the game looks like in terms of the worlds and the backgrounds and the power-ups. And I mean, it really looks great. It's as good looking as any Pixar film. Excuse me. It's as good looking as any Pixar film. There are some fun moments. I mean, there's a whole Mario Kart set piece. There's different set pieces are sort of built from different boards and different games that have featured either Mario or Donkey Kong or both. Donkey Kong is in this movie. Donkey Kong Country is in this movie as well. All that stuff is great. It's a lot of fun. We see Mario actually training on sort of an obstacle course built by Princess. Is it Princess Toadstool? Or is it?
I don't know if it's Princess Peach or I
Princess Peach.
What the hell do I know? I don't know.
Yeah, there's where she trains him on a sort of an obstacle course that's built to sort of, I guess, keep your skills sharp out there. And, you know, they sort of treat Mario and mushrooms like Popeye and spinach.
Okay.
So that's kind of funny. The main issue with the film, and I don't think this is an issue for the people that the film is aimed at, because its first 2 weekends have been, from what I can tell, really great. It had a great opening weekend, and then it had a better than expected hold the second weekend. But the thing about it, it's very by the numbers. It doesn't really offer you anything more than it's a Super Mario Brothers movie. It doesn't offer anything. There's really not much in the way of story. There's not much in the way of Mario and Luigi are barely real characters. There's just nothing there to chew on. And I know people listening are going to be saying to themselves, "Well, Scott, what did you expect? It's a Super Mario
Yeah, they're
Brothers."
not real characters to begin with, right? They're video game characters.
But that's that defense of the film is kind of disingenuous, and I will say why. We've had at this point too many examples to count. Pixar is probably the best comparison. There's been too many Pixar films to count where they have added enough in terms of story and character to give the film some appeal beyond its target audience of kids. That's why a lot of adults can unashamedly say that they enjoy Pixar.
Absolutely.
That was probably the first brand of kids films, aside from a few Disney cartoons before that. That was probably the first consistent brand of kids films where adults could say that and not get laughed at by other adults. Oh, I enjoyed Toy Story just as much as my kid did. Mm-hmm. So that's weak. That's a weak sauce argument. Oh, it's just about a video game. No. It's a weak sauce argument. But look, I enjoyed it for what it was. But like, if you're looking for anything else besides what the title promises, stay home.
Okay. And it's interesting that and I didn't see it, and I have no desire to see it until I can watch it on one of my prepaid streaming services, but Sonic the Hedgehog movies, and there were 2 of them. I'm a fan of Sonic, so I'll admit and own my own biases. My personal bias, based on the video games I owned in my former childhoods, young adultness, I was a Sega guy more than I was a Nintendo guy. So I enjoyed Sonic the Hedgehog, the video game, more than I liked the Nintendo video games. And the big difference is that the big claim to fame Sonic has, the name Sonic, is he's fast. Where they were trying to show off the prowess of the Genesis console, showing how much stuff we can move across the screen and how quickly we can just throw you through these spinning loops. And so it's not just your slow jumping and, like we're fast. And it gave a character personality. And I just liked that game better. But that was in the 90s, and I was in my early 20s when I played that. Now, the movie came out, and I didn't have any expectations. I actually had low expectations seeing the Sonic Hedgehog movie, because I had, much like the Transformers movie, it was hard for me to imagine, how can you take something so fantastic, mix it in with live action, and pull it off as being believable? And they did. And there was a good story. There was a heart there. It was a family story. It was, all kinds of stuff. So the Sonic story, and again, now as an adult, I'm not ashamed to admit I liked that. It had something for the kids, but it had something for the adult too. So there was a story, there was characters, there was heart in that movie. Now you're saying that the Mario movie maybe had a little less heart?
There's just not much in the way. There are underlying themes. Now here's, just to give people, in terms of narrative filmmaking, narrative cinema, there are certain fundamentals of storytelling that have just kind of got to be there for the story, in my opinion, to be considered watchable or decent. And which is why I've always resented that outlook of, oh, what are you expecting? It was just this kind of movie. It was just that kind of movie.
Right.
And like I said, and again, even if you look throughout film history, the moment that Star Wars not only became a worldwide phenomenon, but was nominated for like 7 or 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, at that moment you could no longer say for space opera or science fiction, oh, it's a science fiction movie. What do you expect? That doesn't hold up anymore.
Right. It transcended any type of excuse.
Yeah, and it's now. Here's what I will say, because really I was going to kind of be quick about this anyway, because I've been thinking for a couple of weeks now what I wanted to say about it, so we kind of have it a little bit more condensed. I think the takeover we mentioned with video games, overtaking superheroes as the next IP that Hollywood is going to mine continuously for maybe another decade or few decades, I think it's already kind of started now. I think that Mario is sort of the first shot in an oncoming war. That video games are ultimately probably going to win. It made, I can't remember the exact amount, but yeah, when you look at the success that it's having, two things are clear. the core audience, probably both adults and kids who enjoy Mario. Because at this point, how old am I? I first played Super Mario Brothers in 1988, and it was I know it was around before then.
Early 80s, yeah. Well, Donkey Kong came out in 1981. And Mario Brothers is based on Donkey Kong. And Mario was not called Mario when Donkey Kong came out. He was called Jumpman. And Donkey Kong means like slow or dumb ape from Japanese, kind of like Pokemon is pocket monster. Donkey Kong meant dumb ape. So he didn't become Mario until they created an actual game called Mario Brothers.
I remember Mario Brothers.
And it was two people on the screen. It had all the pipes, and you had to jump up and down and knock the turtles upside down.
It was
from
this
the
whole
pipes.
fantasy universe.
Well, the first Mario Brothers was a single screen,
Right.
and you just had to clear the screen from all the turtles and other monsters, and you had to, squish some things and knock turtles over. And then that turned into Super Mario, which became the world. We had all the different worlds and things like that. And then the Super Mario really is what launched Mario. And Super Mario was in the arcade and in the Nintendo's early to mid 80s. And that launched a phenomenon that has not ended even today. That Mario franchise and all that stuff, that lineage is so rich. And there's a lot of fans. So I was expecting to be disappointed if I saw it. I would see it just out of morbid curiosity and to be able to better talk to you about it on the show. I didn't have time. However, I don't regret not seeing it. I will watch it. So
here's my prediction. When you watch it, it's gonna be entertaining or diverting enough. Like I said, it gives you, it's one of those things that gives you just what it promises and nothing more.
Okay.
And like I said, I'm pretty sure, now we have about 35 to 40 years worth of people, multiple generations now, who know this character and enjoy him. So I'm pretty sure there's tons of middle-aged adults like me who are going to be fine. I'm fine to a degree with it. Like I said, I'm not necessarily expecting the grapes of wrath, so I'm okay with it. But I'd be lying to anybody. I was a big Super Mario fan when I was younger, so it was fun to see the score of the film actually incorporates the music from the movie.
okay, that's good to know.
They actually, and I don't just mean the doom 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 doom, not just the main theme. I mean
Okay.
the music changes according to. Spoiler alert! There's a moment when they get the star that makes you invincible. When Mario gets that star, they do a symphonic version. They do a symphonic version of that score.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
But like I said, it's making it. There's no way they're not going to make, with as much money as it's making, there's no way a sequel is not being worked on. And the one thing I noticed in the beginning of the film, the same way Marvel has that famous now logo that appears at the beginning of every MCU film.
That kind of
which
shows
is
you the
pages.
montage of all the
Sega and Nintendo have that now in front of these movies. They have their own version of that. So it's happening. The shift is happening.
Yes.
But like I said, it just that would be my. If you're a Mario fan and that's what you want and you're not looking for anything else, rush out to see this. If you're kind of a Mario fan but you actually want a good movie, stay home.
Wait for it to stream.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, there's good things in it, but it's not enough to say that it's truly transcendent.
Right, and look, minor, I wouldn't know if I'd call it controversy, but, a few things. Like, there were some headlines where fans of the voice actor for, hey, it's a Mario, he didn't get cast, and they cast Chris Pratt, Star-Lord.
Okay.
Did Chris Pratt bring anything to it? I don't know, I don't care. Another thing, too, John Leguizamo, who played Luigi in the original live-action movie, made a few comments saying he won't see it because there's no Latino representation in the film or in the casting of the film. So he's kind of boycotting it just because he feels like it's a little too Hollywood whitewashing in its casting.
Okay.
That's the only kind of slamming I've heard.
And I'll address both of those things. And I'll try to be nice about addressing. Okay, to the first comment. Okay, I lived in. Mario in this movie Mario and Luigi are from Brooklyn. And that's already, as if that's not stereotypical enough. And they're plumbers.
Italian plumbers from New York.
Okay, now I lived in New York. I lived mostly in Westchester. I lived in Italian neighborhoods a couple of times with New York Italian Americans.
Was anyone there named Tony by any chance?
I met a few guys named Tony.
That's a rhetorical question. Tony, how you doing?
Now, look, here's it's me, Mario. Okay, you can make him talk that way if you want to, but then the Nintendo would have a whole lot of explaining to do when this thing came out. There's a
It's a stereotype. That's a stereotype in itself.
I mean,
right? Yeah.
Look, and I've known enough Italian Americans, just like any other community. If you buy into these stereotypes about them that you see on television, you're going to be disappointed when you actually live among them and see that, oh, they're just regular people like anybody else.
Right.
And that's like, look, come on, it was ridiculous in the game. So
Okay.
I was like, I don't need that whole thing.
Okay.
Make them Italian if you want, but I don't need all that stupidness. Like, and second, as far as what John Leguizamo was saying, for me, that would hold more water if either Mario or Luigi were Latino,
And they're not.
and or if there were other Latinos in the movie that were, and those roles were given to actors who were not Latino. I can
Right.
understand what he's
like,
saying.
Yeah, like kind of like casting David Carradine to play a
Yeah.
Bruce Lee-esque character in the original Kung
If-
Fu.
if-
That's whitewashing.
Yeah, if that's the case, I'm not. I'm not
Yeah.
a fan of that. But like,
Yeah.
that's not exactly what's going on. And John Leguizamo, that Mario Brothers movie he was in, he needs to kind of keep his mouth shut.
Right,
Like,
right.
That's that
Right.
was
Yeah,
nothing.
he's got no point to do anything but be ashamed.
But Phil, I mean, because now let's and that's just a quick segue because I know we don't have a ton of time here, but just these people who want everything to be accurate to the source material. Okay, let me pose a question to fanboys and girls. How far do you want to take that? Because if we're gonna get down to brass tacks, the Punisher in Marvel, one of my favorite Marvel characters ever. Most people know his name to be Frank Castle.
Frank Castle.
That's not his full name. If you've ever read the Circle of Blood miniseries that came out in '85 and '86, that was the miniseries that really showed the character could sustain his own series. That was the thing that really showed that there was a demand for him outside of him just being a supporting villain in Spider-Man. They had a moment in the first issue where he was locked up in Rikers Island, and I think the warden and the warden's assistant were looking in his file. His full name is Castiglione.
Castiglione. If
He's
he's
supposed to be-
Italian, it's Castiglione.
And he's from Queens, and he mostly fights the mafia.
Okay.
Now, how far are we supposed to go with that, fellas? So you want him?
So at that point, he should be an Italian character too.
So does that mean he should talk like De Niro or Joe Pesci?
Yeah.
Is that what you guys want?
You talking to me? You talking to
Yeah,
me?
But
You
that's
looking
that-
at me?
But that's what I mean, and that's what I mean. And then when Italian Americans see that and get offended, then fans are going to say, "Oh, you're crying about nothing." Well, yeah, because it's not your group that's being,
Yeah.
put on display like that. And then on Captain America, Steve Rogers in the Marvel movies themselves is from Brooklyn. Me and my friends always laughed. It's funny how he's a Brooklyn guy.
He's got no accent.
He's got no accent. And look, and that's another thing too. Every New Yorker does not, just the same way everybody in the South does not have this heavy drawl.
Yeah.
Every New Yorker does not talk like
We're close the door.
like Archie Bunker or something.
Right, yeah, and it's like not everybody from Boston says "pack the car and have a
Yeah,
guy,"
but that's
right? So yeah,
there's certain people from these areas who talk
Yeah.
that way. Now, like again, so how far Peter Parker, and I've heard that there's been jokes made about this. I've heard some people say that Peter Parker is basically supposed to be Jewish. He's from Forest Hills, Queens. He's supposed to be Jewish. So again, people, how far are we going to go with
right.
this?
Is he gonna have the little curly things and wear a yarmulke?
Right. It's just
Well,
like
So yeah,
these are fictional characters, and these aren't fictional characters to where their ethnicity is that much of an essential part of who they are. Not to the degree we're making it. So some of this stuff you want Mario to talk like a character.
like a bad stereotype,
Yeah,
really,
like-
an offensively bad stereotype. Yeah,
No thing. I mean, like I said, back in the day, I remember Nintendo 64. They came with Mario 64 in the beginning. It's a me, Mario, and me and my mother always thought, one day my mother was passing by my door. My mother, when she was a young kid in the Bronx, she grew up in an Italian, and she always thought that was hilarious. She was like, "Is that supposed to be? He's supposed to be Italian? Oh, please!" And she would walk
Right.
out the room.
Right.
It was funny, but you guys want to maintain that? All right, go ahead. Good luck. But
All right.
and that's enough of that.
All right, so we're gonna put a fork in the Super Mario Brothers movie discussion as we open up the show. But would you suggest people to see it for the most part? You wouldn't just slam it and say, "Don't waste your time."
No,
right?
I would, like I said, my recommendation is as follows. If you've been playing, if you're like me and you've been playing Mario Brothers since you were 10 or 11, and you've played every iteration and you're a super fan or whatever, then you're largely gonna be fine with this movie. I can't see you having many problems with it. If you're a person who, okay, yeah, I've played Mario games, but I'm more of a casual guy with it. I'm not a big super fan, but
That would be me.
I kind of just want to see a fun, fantasy adventure thing. That's to me, that's kind of on the fence. You may want to kind of think twice before you shell out money to see it. You may want to stay home. If you're a person that doesn't know anything about Mario, but you just like animated movies, stay home unless you only care about how it looks.
Okay. Visually pleasing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap up that topic. I also want to say something, too, regarding our previous episode, which was an important episode because of many reasons. It was our anniversary. We had our first real interview, and we had the debut of our theme song. And I completely screwed the pooch on the audio because we had introduced a new element that we hadn't been doing before, which is having live audio and external audio because we had our guests on Zoom. And that entire thing had echo from our guests. And there's literally no way I can fix that. And I am so upset with myself and with anybody who has to listen to that. But what I have done is I have, in post-production, I have redubbed all of the music tracks to where they are not echoing. However, during the actual interview, anytime you hear the Gimp or Stagger talk, you're going to hear them with an echo. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it bothers me for many levels. So professionally, it bothers me because it happened and I wasn't aware. Personally, it bothers me because I didn't do any testing ahead of time, and this is now frozen in time for life like that. So that really, that just chaps me, right? But it is what it is, and it's out there, and I really can't fix that. We'll interview them again, but it took me so long to do the audio version of that because I had things to do that I just didn't have time to do to redub a few more tracks. So I literally just dropped the audio today. I reposted the video where the two main songs were replaced with non-echoey versions, and now the audio version is completely echo-free on all music tracks. However, the interviews are going to be forever echoed, and I apologize to Gimp and Stagger for doing that. I let Gordon listen to it. He says, yeah, it's not that bad. He was okay with it, but I'm not okay with it. But anyway, so I just want to say, hey, that happened. My bad. I hate myself for it. I hate that it's out there. I'm a perfectionist, and it is, but we're going to move on. So now let's talk about what I'm sure everybody has seen at this point. Let's give our breakdown on Season 3 of The Mandalorian that just wrapped. And Scott, as always, why don't you kick it off for us?
Okay, long and short of it, this is my opinion. Not saying that this is etched into stone. I enjoyed Season 3, especially more toward the end. I think it had some really great action set pieces. I especially liked, I forget the one guy, the bulky Mandalorian with the
Gatling gun type thing, yeah.
Yeah, I loved his last stand. It was great to see what happens when a blaster overheats. So we've never seen that before. So that's kind of
that was cool.
There was episodes that I liked. That being said, and I enjoy. I'm not saying the season was bad. That being said, this is a clear step down in quality from the first two seasons. There's clearly some issues here in terms of some of the production values. It looks a little cheaper in some cases. There were certain episodes where the special effects didn't look as seamless as they did the first two seasons. Even some of the writing, I kind of don't understand why Mando talks so much and why so much of his dialogue is expository. And it's not just him. A lot of these characters have expository dialogue to the point that when something is happening on screen, they're sort of narrating what's happening as it's happening. I don't need you to say what's happening because I can see what's happening. Like,
okay.
Those are, and again, these are things. These aren't just little things that people say. Well, come on, why you're too nitpicky? Stop being a critic. No, that's stuff that's kind of. If you have even a casual awareness again of filmmaking, writing, and those things, that's kind of no. And more importantly, the first two seasons didn't have those same flaws to that degree. like the first two seasons, I remember the second season especially, some of the earlier episodes, the special effects were so good. It literally felt like, okay, if I saw this in a Star Wars movie on the big screen,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's
Yeah.
that seamless. No, this time some of that stuff was just, and also this season had a lot of segues and a lot, instead of just having a main story and a focus, we kind of got a main story in the second half with them taking Mandalore back. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it.
Right.
Again, I want to stress, by the time the season was over, yeah, I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. It's not bad. I wouldn't throw the show out. But it is clear, if the first two seasons were a 10 out of 10, this season was sort of a 7 out of 10 for me.
Okay. I will mostly agree with you, but I'll give you some other reasons why. Number one, let's say if you've ever studied the Hollywood formula for how a movie is supposed to begin and end, and there is a formula to that. You know, you have your Act 1, you have your Act 2, you have your Act 3. You have your opening scene that shows the world before the adventure, and then you have the closing scene that shows the world at the conclusion of the adventure. This followed that formula really good because the opening scene was, to me, I almost thought it was a flashback. You see a young kid getting baptized in the waters to take the oath to become a Mandalorian. And of course, they weren't on Mandalore. They were in a makeshift camp. They almost get eaten by a big turtle monster. And then the whole story happens. And then in the end, when they take over Mandalore, and now they have the proper holy waters to baptize the child, they close on that note. And you can see the contrast of how things used to be to how things are.
Yeah.
That whole arc is the Hollywood formula for how a movie
Right.
begins and ends. So it opened interestingly and it closed properly. What I didn't like, and it's happened a few times now, was they will waste an entire episode, sometimes 2 episodes, on side characters that aren't that
Right.
interesting to me. Like the dude with the glasses who was the cloning guy.
The doctor.
The doctor, right? Now he's a callback to episode 1, and it was in episode 2 as well when we were revealing all this cloning technology that is foreshadowing to what would become Palpatine in episode 9, essentially in the Star Wars movie sequels. And by the way, the timeline of the Mandalorian takes place between episode 6 and episode 7, right? So it takes place after the original Star Wars trilogy concluded, and it takes place before the new trilogy picks up. That's the timeline. So there's some foreshadowing in there with all the cloning that we're assuming is going to lead to the cloning, or has been part of the cloning of Palpatine. We learned in season 3, Moff Gideon was trying to clone himself and to clone the Force into himself. That's interesting. My struggles with it are kind of self-induced because I never watched any of the animated series. I have not watched any of the Clone Wars. I haven't watched Rebels or any of those things. So some of these characters are characters that are canon, but they're not canon from any of the live-action movies I've watched, so I don't know their full stories. Doesn't take away from enjoying what they're doing and who they are in the context of these shows, but I don't have some of the bonus enjoyment that a fan who's seen it all has by seeing these characters. I think Moff Gideon is a really interesting character, and I love the actor who plays him. Is it Carlos Esposito? What is his name?
Giancarlo Esposito.
Don Carlo Esposito. Great actor. Has done a lot. So he's made a really interesting character, but I only know him from 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. Great character. The Darksaber. That is something, did that take place in the Clone Wars? I don't know, because I didn't watch them, right? So a lot of these things that are, key plot elements, if you don't know the backstory, you're kind of denied. I enjoyed the whole season. I felt it ended really strong. I felt we lost momentum when 1 or 2 episodes. I love the Jack Black episode, though. The Jack Black episode was great just to see Jack Black and to see Doc from Back to the Future. What's his name right now? I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd, right? So to see Christopher Lloyd and to see Jack Black and what's the other rapper chick's name?
I can't. Her name escapes me.
Yeah. So to see that was a great episode. Most of it, I felt really we lost momentum. The takeaway was meeting the broken faction that Bo-Katan Kryze is trying to bring into the fold. But 75% of that film was a complete loss of momentum to get there. However, some of those scenes with the repurposed battle droids. I think what a lot of The Mandalorian has done in these past 3 episodes has redeemed so many of things I consider to be failures in the prequel trilogies, like him having that Naboo fighter is cool, because I never thought the Naboo fighters were cool. Those big destroyer droids that were in the army, to see those again, and being used in a way where I like them better now than I did in the old movie. So there's a few things it's done to redeem a lot of the things I didn't like about the prequel trilogy. I do like, but I felt like there was 2 or 3 episodes that probably didn't need to be there. The story was, as you say, taking back Mandalore. The story was bringing all of the Mandalorians together again, because apparently they had all broken off into different bands, into different factions. Some of them were being the pure, this is the way, we're going to wear the helmet, not show our faces. Other ones are screw the helmet, and we're mercenaries for hire. So they all had different agendas and different creeds, but at the end, they were brought together. So was there a happy ending in that regard? Absolutely. All the Mandalorians are back together, one big tribe. They're back on planet Mandalore. They've relit the Forge, which is where all that is it Beskar armor? Is that the metal? Beskar armor? Beskar metal, the Beskar armor. They are now ready to kick ass and take names. And I even like what they did when they basically made badass stormtroopers out of the Beskar metal for those, and Moff Gideon's armor, which was kind of a hybrid between Darth Vader, a stormtrooper, and a Mandalorian.
And Moff Gideon's not dead, by the way.
And he's not dead, by the way, even though they make you think he was consumed by flames. That's just too. That would be too easy.
That
would just be too easy. So I think it ended strong. I feel the core thread of the story was we had to start off with Din Djarin getting back his Mandalore status, because he lost it because he admitted he had to take off his helmet. So he achieved that objective. Bo-Katan Kryze had to get all the Mandalorians together. We achieved that objective. So we got the Mandalorians together. We reclaimed Mandalore, which was taken away from us from the Empire. We achieved that objective, and now we are one again. And so I think that closed a lot of stuff that not only has been going on these 3 seasons, but probably closed a lot of stuff that happened in the Clone Wars that I never saw. So I feel it achieved a really good objective. I just felt it could have been tighter. There were some slow spots. And sometimes the slow spot is good. And some of the times the benefit of a live streaming series is you can take your foot off the gas. You can do some world building. You can do some character building. And sometimes it serves the story. I don't feel any of the idle episodes really helped the story in any way other than just bore the shit out of me. But as a season, I felt it was a great season and it ended strong and I enjoyed it. Thumbs up.
No, it's a thumbs up for me too, but it's not as high of a thumbs up as those first 2 seasons were, to the point where I'm kind of wondering, it feels like both Favreau and is it Filoni?
David Filoni, who did the animated series.
Yeah, I think that they both, I'm not sure if they had complete control as they did of the first 2 seasons. It seems like there was another hand in this, or perhaps somebody from corporate, or some people from corporate telling them what they wanted, because it just the feel is just different. Anybody who's seen those first 2, you can see the difference in, and I don't know if it's because those 2 seasons were made before the pandemic, and then this is coming after the pandemic.
And this was maybe shot fragmentedly or something like that.
And also if you've seen what's been happening with Disney, where there's clearly some things going on.
There's a lot of corporate shakeup. From the top down, especially on the big camps like Marvel and Star Wars. There's a lot of shaking up, a lot of changing of people are getting let go. People are all kinds of stuff.
Well, I think they're realizing that the business model that they've been using, especially for Disney Plus and even the Marvel movies, is not sustainable indefinitely, because now Marvel has been around for a while. It's not a new thing anymore. So all the fans aren't necessarily going to rush out to see every single thing that Marvel puts out anymore. So
and it's happening in DC too. Yeah. There's definitely superhero fatigue, and we talked about that episode 36.
So I recommend it. It's not. It's not bad. It's not it's not something you can just dismiss and throw away.
No,
but
no, you can't really diss it, but we can give some honest opinions on a few elements that I think any discerning person would agree with to some point. But in the end, definitely give it a solid thumbs up for an entire season, for a great arc that I just felt had just a few idle spots that was the only thing that really, for me, distracted from it. I didn't even really notice any lack of visual effects continuity, but I respect and I will take your word on that one, because I'm usually fairly good at that, but you know how that goes.
well, like I say, that's just me.
Yeah.
I can't speak for anybody
Yeah.
else.
So and you probably didn't see this. So we started the show on something that I didn't see, but you did. Now we'll close the show on something that I saw that you probably didn't, which is season 3 of Picard, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Which I've heard a lot about on my Facebook timeline.
And I've been very vocal about this since we've been doing this show for a year now. I'm a huge fan of what Paramount Plus is doing with Star Trek. Whereas Disney Plus is taking Marvel and Star Wars and Willow and all these legacy properties and is having lots of hits and misses, the very inconsistent delivery of quality. Paramount Plus has been solid quality on everything they've done. Strange New Worlds with Captain Pike and the early versions of Mr. Spock and Lieutenant Uhura, and then we got to meet Jim Kirk before he becomes the captain. That was great. 3 seasons of Picard. Picard, it's called Star Trek Picard. So obviously Jean-Luc Picard is the main character who was the captain of the Next Generation, which came out around 1987, 88 ish time frame. Late 80s was when Star Trek The Next Generation came out. And for me, my experience with TNG when it first came out was, I was like, I didn't know how to take this. In the late 80s, I might have been in my late teens, early 20s. And my whole concept of Star Wars was freaking William Shatner, James T. Kirk. He's the badass, debonair ladies' man. You know what I mean? And so that's what I came to expect from a captain, because that's how I was programmed to expect a captain to be. Hey, Dinty's Hideaway's out there. Hey, Dinty. And so when you see this guy, this bald-headed dude, how can you take him seriously? I'm like, and so the dumb young person in me was saying to myself, this can't be Star Trek. There's no James Kirk. There's no badass in here. There's some old bald dude, right? So just being kind of ignorant and somewhat prejudiced on what I thought a captain should be. So I never got into The Next Generation when it first came out. I didn't really start watching it until it had already been into syndication, and I was catching in reruns on the Sci-Fi Channel in the late 90s. So it had already been out for a decade. Then I started watching it, and then I started getting into it. I'm like, oh man, this is good. And then I started watching some of the movies that came out, and I felt like the Next Generation movies that were coming out were better than some of the later Star Trek original series movies. I felt like they were better movies. And then I became a fan, but I became a fan really, really late, almost too late. So by the time I became a fan, it was off the air. And it was only in reruns, and it was only in the syndication. But I was like, oh man, I really missed the Next Generation train. But about a year or two ago, I watched the whole thing when it was on Netflix. And I was like, this is really good. I think most people, when you look at the history of Star Trek, think that the Next Generation is the single best series, even better than the original series. And then I think they put the original series somewhere in second or third place behind Deep Space Nine, and I haven't watched them all. But that run was a great run, other than the first season, which really the characters, they had to work things out, and they got rid of a character, and they kind of then gelled. So Star Trek The Next Generation is pretty much, for if you're a lifelong Star Trek fan, probably one of your favorite things. Now, the Picard series, which has only been out for 3 years now, is kind of like a legacy sequel, but it's done so well. And each season kind of focused on a particular character and a particular kind of closure. So season 1 was all about Data and clones of Data and descendants of Data and this whole synthetic life and his synthetic life and all these other things. And it ended up closing very poignantly as being a love letter to Data, where Data finally got to die. And Data had risked his life and sacrificed his life in one of the last Star Trek movies to save Captain Kirk, but somehow his consciousness was somewhere stored. And he's like, I just want to die. Let me die. And so that whole season kind of ended on that love letter to Data. So and it was really cool. It kept you in suspense. It kept you interested, and it closed well. Season 2 became a love letter to Q, and Q, it kind of opened up season 1, episode 1, which was something on Farpoint. And Q was this mysterious character who kind of came and went through the entire run of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So season 2 became a love letter to Q, and in the end of season 2, Q allegedly dies. It was this supposedly immortal being from a realm of that. So now season 3, what are we going to do in season 3? Well, we start off seeing a teaser of Beverly Crusher. So you think to yourselves, okay, this is going to be a love letter to Beverly Crusher, who was the doctor on the Enterprise and a on and off again love interest from Jean-Luc. All right, this is going to be a love letter to Beverly Crusher. It ends up being a love letter to the entire cast of the Enterprise, because we close out by reuniting all of the cast, and so we get them all together, which was great if you're a fan. Everybody's there. And unfortunately now, in the time that we're in, they're almost as old as like now, in the original series, most of them are gone. Like William Shatner's still here. I think George Takei is, and I think Chekhov is. I can't think of his real name right now.
Uhuru is gone.
Uhuru, yeah, we lost in the show.
Spock is gone.
Spock is gone. So we've lost most of the cast of the original series. We're getting to that age now where the cast of the Next Generation, like Patrick Stewart, I thought he looked old
Back
30
then.
years ago because he was bald. When you look at him now, some bitch is old, right? He's got his eyes are like half wrinkled shut closed. He looks old now compared to before. So unfortunately, Patrick Stewart will not be with us forever. They closed on a love letter to the entire legacy of the Next Generation with all the characters. The Enterprise D is there, the ship they flew, it got restored. Geordi restored it. Geordi's daughters are in it, who are his real life daughters too. So LeVar Burton's daughters play characters that are his daughters in the show. That's great. But having and then having Data there. Now, since they had killed Data like 2 or 3 times between the movies and 2 seasons of this, how the hell are we going to bring Data back again? They do it in a really cool way. It's like fragments of different versions of Data that were kind of stored, that then all get kind of amalgamated into a biological body. So it's got part of an old version of Data, part of his evil twin brother Lore, part of Dr. Soon, part of another version of Data that was called B4. So you have all these versions of Data all merged together into a biological body that actually can age. So you've got an age-appropriate version of Brent Spiner playing Data. Now he's more human than ever, which was always his goal, to be human. He always wanted to learn what it was like to be human. And so all of these wishes are fulfilled. So if you're a fan of the series, season 3 of Picard, I felt was the best fan service, but it wasn't gratuitous fan service. Everything made sense. Lieutenant Worf, played by Michael Dorn, his character journey, he became like a samurai who was on, I'm learning how to meditate and be at peace and drink tea and all of these things. He was no longer the ravaging Klingon. And the whole Klingon character is kind of based on Genghis Khan when you think about it, this war-mongering race of people who just want to savage and kill and dominate. So to go from a warmonger to almost a meditational pacifist, that journey that Worf took, and he still kicked ass because he's still a very physical fighter and still did it when he had to do it. There's nothing bad I can say about that entire season. And so if I had to compare season 3 of Picard to season 3 of The Mandalorian, Picard was a better season throughout and a better finale throughout. Season 3 of Mando is still great, don't get me wrong. But if I had to hold them up together, Picard kicked its ass in every way. But it's almost unfair because these characters in this journey has been 30 years in the making, where The Mandalorian has only been 3. So there isn't, unless, well, for me anyways, because I never watched the Clone Wars. I don't have that 2 decades of Clone Wars stuff that I haven't watched. So in my opinion, there is a little bit of unfairness to the Star Trek side of this, but the quality was there. The soul was there. If you're a fan of the characters, if you're a fan of that story, ended strong, ended well, and it set up a whole new spin-off of a new generation of the children of the previous cast in 7 of 9, who was from actually Voyager, which was another spin-off from the Next Generation in the same timeline as Deep Space Nine and the Next Generation. So 7 of 9 was the half-Borg from Voyager, who has been in all 3 seasons. The only thing I wished season 3 of Picard had was a cameo or an appearance from Captain Janeway from Voyager, who I understand somewhere in the timeline, she's supposed to be an admiral or high-ranking person somewhere. If we could have got Captain Janeway in there, I would have been a huge nerdgasm for me. But other than that, I loved everything about it. Nothing to nitpick. No, anytime they let the foot off the gas, it wasn't a dull idle. It was a breath. There was a hill and a valley to the waveform of the energy and soul and emotion of the show. So I loved it, loved it, loved it. 10,000 thumbs up. Recommend it to all fans. I'm done. Anything you want to say?
Not much I can say because I've always respected Star Trek. I've never really been a fan, but I've always respected it. I've liked episodes of the original series that I've seen. I've seen a few episodes of those. I've seen a few episodes of the Next Generation that I like, but it's never been something that stuck with me to where I followed it. But I respect it because it's one of those original geek properties like Lord of the Rings. That is just Star Trek and Lord of the Rings begat a lot of what we have now. So,
right.
But it sounds like a good watch because I know there were people who didn't like the first couple of seasons of Picard but loved this one. That's what I saw a lot of on my news feed. Those people who didn't think the show was any good, but then this season changed their minds.
Okay. And listen, that's the thing. Everybody has their own opinion, and it depends on, number one, where your fandom is. Where your emotional loyalties and investments are into any character or franchise or property. And then ultimately it's going to depend on what you felt was delivered by what you just watched. Did it meet your expectations? And even if it didn't, because it wasn't what you wanted it to be, doesn't mean it's bad. It just wasn't your cup of tea. So I can respect that. I like them all because I am a fan, but I also felt they delivered a good story at the right pace. And when you look at somebody like Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, who's literally like 90-something years old, and his character is literally 90-something years old, you can't expect that guy to be the guy that's going to be running down the street, chasing down bad guys and beating the shit out of them. You know what I mean? So some of the momentum of the character has to be contextually tied to his real-world physical abilities. But the story wasn't an old man on a wheelchair slowly going through life. There was still a lot of action in all three of these seasons. But I can see why it might not work for everybody. But I loved it. And I'm looking forward to the next season of Strange New Worlds that will be coming out. So those are the three things we wanted to talk about. I have just a few more little footnotes on a few news things that have come through my head. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's it, pretty much.
Okay. So what I will say, and I try to avoid, and so we'll go ahead and announce this as news. Hold on one second. Let's do the official infographic here.
It's time for News with Culture Goes Pop.
Okay, so when it comes to news, I'll just say one thing, and I've held off commenting on this until I heard an official confirmation, but there's been a lot of rumors that Warner Brothers and HBO would be doing a live-action new series based on the Harry Potter books by J.K. Rowling. So a lot of it was rumor, speculation, wishful thinking. It's now been confirmed by Warner Brothers themselves. So the goal is that they're going to spend about 10 years on doing this. Now, if you look, because my wife and I just finished rewatching the whole Harry Potter movie franchise, and that movie franchise took about 10 years to release cinematically as well. And the timeline of the characters going from basically 10 or 11 years old to like 18 years old when you graduate high school, that's kind of the arc of the timeline of the story. So, but it's going to be live action. Each season will focus on one of the books and is going to be getting much more into the story and much more into the characters. So I don't know how long a season is going to be. A lot of times a streaming season is anywhere between like 8 to 13 episodes. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out. But the plan is live action, focusing on a more accurate and in-depth and detailed accounting of what's in the books, and taken 10 years to do it. And they've also thrown out that there might be some surprises in some of the diversity in the casting, where there might end up being maybe some gender swaps or race swaps or something else like that, just to be more inclusive. But bottom line is, I became a fan of Harry Potter by watching the movies. I never read the books, and then I started playing the game. I loved the game. So I consider, and then now we're starting to watch the Fantastic Beasts ones too, which was kind of a prequel, 3-movie prequel before Harry Potter timeline, like in the mid 1920s. and we're looking at like a young Dumbledore and stuff. So I've become a fan of the Harry Potter universe without reading the books. So I'm looking forward to a deeper dive in what Warner Brothers and HBO streaming will do with this. I'm not sure when we're going to see it. It might be a year, it might be two before we see it. But I'm looking forward to see what they do with that, if they can do it well. Because HBO has done well. If you look at what they did with The Last of Us, if you look what they did at Game of Thrones, with the exception of the last season, HBO can take a story, can take a book and adapt it and make a really good series that is pretty faithful to that core material. Because I'm simultaneously listening to the Game of Thrones audiobooks and watching the show, and for the most part, they're following it pretty well, and whatever changes they make sense. So I think we're in good hands with Warner Brothers and HBO to handle this property, and I'm looking forward to what they do with on that. And I know you're not as big of a Harry Potter fan, but any thoughts on that?
Not many. I've seen some of the Harry Potter films that I've liked, but again, that's not something I follow. So I mean, if the show was good, I'll check out the first episode. If it's any good, I'll keep following it.
That's it. That's all we can ask. All right. Well, we actually got an episode done in under an hour. Good job, Scott. Any final thoughts or words, inspiration, suggestions, advice?
Not at the moment. I have to look and see what's coming up in the coming weeks.
Okay. So you saw for the first time our new official intro with our new official theme song on the way in. You're now going to see for the first time our official outro with our play out. So here we go, boys and girls. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Culture Goes Pop. From nostalgia to now, from geek to chic, created and hosted by Steve Strobridge and Scott T. Wilson. The Culture Goes Pop theme song is created by the Gimp and Stagger from Ethereal Matter Records and is copyright 2023. If you'd like to send us feedback, comments, suggestions, or would like to be a guest on a future episode, reach out to us via email. That address is show@culturegoespop.com. For links to places where you can catch us live streaming or on podcast platforms, visit us on the web at culturegoespop.com. We stream live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. We're available as an audio podcast on all the major platforms, including Amazon Music and Podcasts, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you've enjoyed our show, please take a moment to rate and review it on your podcast app and share with your friends. See y'all on the next episode.